Would you like to win more medical cleaning contracts with your commercial cleaning service? Well, in this video, I'm going to give you 6 tips that are going to help you as a commercial cleaning business owner add more medical offices to your portfolio of clients. Having medical offices as clients provides 2 main benefits. First one being they tend to pay a bit more, so you don't have to have a large facility to have a high-paying contract in many medical scenarios. The other benefit being economic resilience, which simply means in a recession or any sort of downturns in an economy, or even back in 2020 when there were closures, medical stays open and it stays operating. People continue getting sick, they continue getting hurt. We wish this wasn't the case for everybody, but those places need cleaned because there's constantly going to be people going to medical offices needing help. Now, all of those benefits that medical contracts can provide to your business are offset with, they can be very difficult to win, but not for you, because you're about to get these tips that I used to win more medical contracts in my commercial cleaning business. In fact, when we first started our company in 2019, we started off targeting exclusively medical offices. And by the end of our first year, we were doing over $550,000 in annual recurring revenue just from medical offices. Now, before we jump into the tips, I do want to help advise you against making a certain mistake. And the mistake that I see many commercial cleaning business owners make is that they tend to want to just charge medical more because it's medical. And what we need to get straight is it's not as simple as that. The reason that medical tends to be priced higher is because they have a higher traffic load, they have a higher frequency of cleaning needs, and each cleaning tends to be more intense. But there are many cases where there are certain medical offices or doctor's offices that aren't as high on the intensity scale with each of those 3 factors. Thinking through each of those, traffic, frequency, and intensity for that specific medical office will help you gauge your price off of the baseline so that you don't overprice yourself or underprice yourself. So keep those factors in the back of your mind: traffic, frequency, and intensity. Because those, along with some of these other tips that you're about to learn, are going to affect the price that you should charge in order to win. Okay, so here's the tips in no particular order. Ultimately, what we need to recognize is that in order to get medical offices to choose us over, say, a competitor company, is we need to have built more trust and confidence in them about our ability and our knowledge and our expertise. And one of the fastest ways to do that is to bring up this specific topic in the conversation of the walkthrough as soon as possible. And that is HIPAA. HIPAA stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Now, why is that important to us? Well, in a nutshell, it essentially comes down to protecting people's privacy. You see, there's certain areas in medical facilities where they're supposed to deposit documents that are going to end up being shredded. Because those documents have people's names, social security numbers, very sensitive information, and conditions that they have that could affect their employment elsewhere or the way people perceive them. There's all kinds of reasons that it needs protected. So because a medical office deals with a lot of that sensitive information for individuals, they can't just throw those papers into the trash like a regular trash can that would be emptied and taken out to the regular dumpster. Instead, they go into what are called shred bins. And these shred bins are usually dumped into a main shred bin that then a shredding company comes by at a later point and takes that to a shredding location or to a shredding truck and takes care of it. If a medical office thinks that if for any reason someone's information ended up in the regular trash and was taken out to a regular dumpster, you could be having a phone call saying, dumpster dive, find the paper, get it out. Because if they are ever caught not handling people's privacy properly, they are subject to tens and even hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines per incident. So one of the things that's in the back of their mind when you're coming into a walkthrough is, does this person really know what we have to deal with at that red tape level? And so what I encourage you to do is to ask them this question: where are your shred bins and how are they marked? And then you want them to show you those shred bins on the walkthrough so that you can make a note of where they are and how they're identified. Because some medical offices and even large ones don't have these big shred bins just sitting around. Sometimes there's areas and office areas where they have just a cardboard box and it looks like a recycle bin almost sometimes, and it just has papers in it. That needs to be identified for what it is. Is it a shred bin? is it not? Because the other piece of your expertise can be providing labels for them for their shred bins if needed. The moment they realize that you understand HIPAA and that you're prepared to protect their medical office and you're prepared to follow the proper procedures in their facility, ultimately that means that your team avoids shred bins and would report anything in any trash can that should belong in a shred bin. They're going to feel much more confident in you. So that's tip number one, establish HIPAA compliance. Also in medical offices, you're going to run into all kinds of different equipment and tools that are used throughout the facility. So something you want to discuss with them early on is their presence of sharps. And simply put, a sharp is anything that's used to penetrate someone's body, whether that's a syringe, whether that is a scalpel, whether it's anything that could cut anybody that's used for medical procedures. Now, in our company, we don't mess with sharps. There are actually whole sharp disposal companies that exist that are out there. We don't mess with that because there's a whole lot of red tape you got to go through because of how dangerous they are, and they're exposed to bloodborne pathogens and possible diseases and sicknesses. So you really don't want to get jabbed by one of these needles or cut by one of these scalpels. So what we do in our company, and it's a good place to start with your own company if you're not ready to dive down the rabbit hole of dealing with sharps, I suggest at least bringing the topic up with the facility manager or the medical administrator. And all that this topic is about is, what do you want us to do if we find a sharp that's not inside of a sharps container? By default, in our company, we don't touch it. We will send a picture of it in the garbage to the manager, and that's it. We're not going to mess with it. It's up to their staff to take care of something like that. But if they have a different process that they want to request, then you can at least understand what they're going to request of you, and you can choose to adjust your price accordingly. You can ask them to share any of the guidelines that they have in their facility with handling those sharps. But this is the time now to address the potential situation you could run into. By establishing a sharps procedure, that's going to, again, set you apart from other cleaning companies that just come in there and take some measurements and leave. In relation to sharps, or more like using sharps, you're potentially going to run across blood. And the easiest way to put a medical administrator at ease over your ability to handle blood is to actually complete a bloodborne pathogen course. Now, these are simple trainings you can get online, very cheap. It's not expensive. It's not extremely time-consuming. But ultimately, what they do is they print off a certificate for you. And what you can do is bring the certificate with you, whether it's in your marketing content or in a folder that you bring, but you can provide them with an example certificate. It can be your actual certificate or just a copy of it, of your bloodborne pathogen training completion. Now, we'll cover that in a different video about dealing with blood, but here's a really quick tip that actually I'm thinking of as I'm going through this that's not included in the 6, and that is you don't want to confuse iodine for blood. Oftentimes, the staff in medical offices will pour iodine into a sink, and it can pool up, and it can dry, and it can cake, and it can look like blood. If someone hasn't been around pooled blood at all, the first glance at something like iodine can scare them. So provide them with your bloodborne pathogen training certificate, and then on the side, be sure that you understand and your staff understand the difference between how iodine appears and blood appears. Now, something else unique inside of medical facilities that can actually dramatically adjust the cost of cleaning and therefore the price that you charge is, what are their staff doing? To clarify this, the first big medical office that we won in our company, we were told to not wipe down the counter spaces. And that really puzzled me. It took off an enormous amount of work for us, which was great, but it turns out that the staff had what they called cavi wipes, and there's all kinds of different wipes they use throughout the day, but they're already sanitizing the exam rooms, the procedure rooms, and then the lab counters. They're taking care of all of that constantly throughout the day. So for your sake of getting your pricing accurate, you want to ask, what are your staff already sanitizing through their shifts? And then you can ask for more clarity if needed about if they want you to also do the same thing, or if that's just something that you don't need to worry about and therefore your client doesn't need to pay for it. Oftentimes, using that as leverage to get your pricing more accurate for them is what can make the difference. So know what their staff do. Now, when we first started our business in medical, I was not aware of this next one at all until we ran into an issue with it. And it is around what are called antibacterial soaps. You would think that in a medical facility that all they'd have would be something like hand sanitizer and then some regular hand soap, whether it's liquid or foaming, however it comes out. But then there is a third, and it's called antibacterial. Sometimes it's called antimicrobial hand soap. Antibacterial soap is more regulated than regular soaps. And in most cases, at least in our client portfolio, our clients handle refilling those on their own. We don't touch them at all. So in your conversation of the medical facility, be sure to ask the administrator, do you use antibacterial soaps? And if they say yes, you want them to take you to one as an example so that you can identify it. Now from there, they may ask you to refill those and the other soaps or sanitizers. Be sure that it's clear what they want you to do. But in most cases, from what we've seen, the medical facility wants to highly control the refilling of those soaps. You're not supposed to mix water into any soaps to make them last longer. They'll get fined for that. You can't mix two different brands of regular soap into the same bottle. They'll get fined for that. You can only use the same soap poured by a refill of its own self into a bottle, and you can't mix water or other soaps with any antibacterial soaps either. And you know what? I've got another 7th tip for you after number 6 here, so hang in for it. So if the medical administrator has confidence in you that you understand just how serious soaps are in their industry, then that's again going to put you ahead of the competition. So number 6 is you need to understand the difference between terminal disinfection cleaning, clinical sanitation, and just general office cleaning. Those are the 3 main scenarios you're going to run into in a medical facility. Now, usually terminal disinfection cleaning is going to be for surgery centers in the actual surgical room. You're not going to go clean the administrator's office in a terminal disinfection manner. The room where they're actually cutting someone open and there's going to be exposure to all of what's in the environment, that's where it has to be completely disinfected. Now, there are trainings that go into more detail on this, but essentially everything in the room, walls, ceilings, vents, equipment, floors, everything needs to be disinfected, and anyone in that space needs to be gowned up and covered up because they're not supposed to add any more contaminants to that area. As a quick note, if you're quoting an area like this, you're looking at a cleaning speed of about 200 square feet per hour. So you can measure out one of those rooms and figure out how long it would take to do the cleaning in that room. Then you come to clinical sanitation. So these are areas that need a higher level of cleaning than, say, office cleaning, which we're all familiar with, but they also don't need that high level of disinfection of every single surface, every single visit. And as a quick note on this, you can actually get a CHESIP certification and tout that as well in this process because it really goes into a lot of detail on all these procedures, what you're doing in these clinical areas versus the terminal areas and general areas, but it's a good way to set yourself apart from the competition. But essentially these clinical areas need more sanitization. And sanitization simply means a dramatic reduction in the amount of contaminants in that area. So yes, you're likely going to have to wipe down and sanitize a vast majority of the surfaces, but you're not having to do ceilings and walls and having to disinfect the floors every time. But as we've also discussed, in areas like exam rooms or in labs, which we would consider clinical areas, those could also be getting highly cared for by the medical staff throughout the day. So be sure that you clarify in those clinical areas, what are the staff doing versus what do we need to do? As a general rule of thumb, you're looking at a cleaning speed of anywhere between 1,500 to about 2,800 square feet per hour. Now, I know that's a wide range because that depends on how dense the area is and how intense the cleaning needs to be based on what their staff are doing already. Then you got your office or what we call clerical areas or administrative areas where the manager is and the billing department is, anyone who's running the phones or their call center. Those are the areas also too, that's where HIPAA is going to likely be, right? Those medical documents are being pulled there, they're being signed and put there and then put into shred bins. All of that is going to happen in those administrative areas. But as far as a cleaning speed for these, they're going to be much more like general office cleaning. And the mistake that you don't want to make in medical when pricing this is assuming that those office areas need the same level of intense clean every day as all the other clinical areas. Because that's simply just not the case. We have many medical offices where we handle the clinical areas every single day. But when it comes to the office areas, we have rotations. So on Mondays, we'll dust. On Tuesdays, we'll vacuum. On Wednesdays, we'll dust again maybe, or we'll wipe down some other parts of the surfaces. So there's a rotation going on to where ultimately the offices get cleaned anywhere from 1 to 3 times per week. So that puts the office cleaning areas of a medical office around the 4,000 to 5,000 square feet per hour as far as how fast they can be cleaned. Now, the 7th tip is an opportunity for an upsell. What you can do in these medical offices is offer something called touch point disinfection. All that touch point disinfection is really quickly disinfecting doorknobs, light switches, any sort of touch panels that staff would be touching, or even that people coming into the facility and bringing stuff into the facility would be touching a lot. If you take time to disinfect those, it does take a little bit. That's why it's an upsell for an extra charge. It can really help, though, reduce the sickness in a facility. And that's something that appeals to a medical office because a buzzword that they use is cross-contamination, which is someone brings in something that no one else wants to get sick from, but because they touch something, it crosses over to someone else whenever that other person touches that surface. In order to price touchpoint disinfection, there's a couple factors to consider. You just need to think about how long does a chemical need to sit. It's called a dwell time. How long does it need to sit on the surface? And then what's required to remove that chemical from the surface or to rinse the surface. So you take that and then add that to how many doorknobs and how many light switches or other surfaces in the facility need done, and then figure out how long it would take someone to do that and just apply your hourly rate. If you want more medical cleaning contracts with these healthcare facilities to build in those higher priced clients and that recession resilience into your commercial cleaning business, then check out the links down below. That's how I built my business from the ground up, and we still service medical today. So we're here to help you build an incredible commercial cleaning business. My name's Matt, your 7-figure commercial cleaning CEO. If I can help you anyway, please check out the links down below. We just want to be a blessing to you. And until next time, thanks so much for watching. Keep building.